welcome to Voices Unveiled, a platform where we bring women's stories from different corners of the world. I'm your host, Sumina. And today I'm thrilled to kick off our first episode of 2025, which is also our 7th in total. To start the year with fresh insights, we have a very special guest today, Mr. Venge Nyirongo, the Intergovernmental Specialist on Climate Change, Sustainable Development and the Rio Conventions at UN Women. Together, we'll explore the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action and the 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. What do these milestones really mean for women and girls today? And are they still as relevant as they were decades ago? But before we dive in, do subscribe and follow Women for Biodiversity on social media. Our handles are in the description box. Your support means the world to us. Thank you so much, Venge, for coming in today. I know it's quite late. You're coming in from New York right now. It's quite late over there.
Yes.
Thank you
It's
so
after
much.
10 p.m. right now.
I know, and what must have been a very long and tiring working day for you.
Absolutely. I mean, with preparations for the upcoming negotiations for the Commission on the Status of Women, things could never be more intense at UN Women right now.
Like you just said, the Commission on Status of Women, the 69th session on the Commission of Status of Women is coming up soon. It's next month. However,
Yes.
we're also celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. So what would you identify as the most significant achievements in advancing women's rights globally? And where have we seen the most disappointing setbacks or stagnations?
Well, that sounds like a loaded question. There have been so many achievements that have been realized since the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action in 1995. Imagine the establishment of UN Women alone being one big statement that came out of the women's movement and emboldened by the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action itself. This, of course, came several years later because UN Women was only established 15 years ago in 2010 out of a UN General Assembly resolution. But that in itself demonstrates the growing commitment by the world to achieve gender equality and women's empowerment across the world. The other thing, of course, is I think we all would agree that the world is talking about gender equality and the empowerment of women everywhere these days, every time. More people are realizing that gender equality creates a better world for everyone, which again was the ethos for the Beijing Declaration. The world has made significant steps into integrating gender equality across many areas of global and national development. It's central to global dialogue right now, including in normative spaces on the environment in which you and I, Sumina, share common interest. The UNCBD, for example, has the KMGBF, which then has a gender plan of action, which is an important recognition of the centrality of gender equality and women's empowerment in the achievement of environmental targets as well. So there are so many achievements. I think if you look across women's health, education, and there have been times when girls' education has advanced so much that in certain places, for example, in Pacific Island states, you have girls being more educated than boys, and having those countries trying to now balance the equation again, I would say, because of the tipping scales that have benefited from the movement to bring about a more gender equal world. At the same time, so many challenges still persist. Let me give you clearer picture of what this means in the context of the 30th anniversary of Beijing. We have done research at UN Women that recently finds that a girl born today will have to be 39 years old before women hold as many seats in parliament as men. That very same girl will have to be 68 years old before child marriage ends. And even worse, she would have to be 137 years old before extreme poverty for women and girls is eradicated. We were basically looking at some of our research that came out of 2023 on gender equality and climate change, where we know that over 236 million more women and girls are going to be pushed into hunger by 2050 if the current trends on climate change persist. So the scenery that we're looking at is very grim if you consider all the work that we need to do to achieve gender equality. And then look at resourcing, both in human and financial terms, which is still very minimal. If you look at human resources, governments will have gender focal points across different ministries. But if you really look into the details, you'll find that these are individuals that have not been given enough power to make decisions within ministries. Look at gender organizations, they're usually the least financially resourced, which means the world is not paying enough attention to empowering action to address gender equality in different sectors and in different parts of the world. The other thing that really bothers me is the world generally still considers women as being vulnerable. And yet, it's 30 years since Beijing. We should have been in a better place by now in terms of our own stereotypes around women's positions and roles in this world. We sort of overlook the important roles that women and girls are playing for human prosperity and advancement. There are so many capabilities that women and girls bring to the table, and we are just living in a world that is not quite open to that. And I guess all of these challenges that I'm citing for you basically bring us to understanding that power structures remain archaic, but they also remain unchallenged, which perpetuates a world that is so male-dominated and tramps on the rights and potentials of women and girls as contributors. I would even cite the care economy as a great example, where women still perform on average 2.5 more hours on care work within the household, which usually goes unpaid, than men. And if you look at financing, there's so many times we've seen that, for example, global ODA on climate financing being 2 to 4% dedicated to the achievement of gender equality. So these are some of the issues that we continue to see in terms of continuing challenges on gender equality, which, in my view, would help unlock so much progress that we would make if we made that small, deliberate attempt to change.
Thank you, Venge, for that very elaborate answer and for explaining a lot of things. And pardon me for the very loaded question from the get-go. It's not every day that every day that I'm an expert that I can pick out their brains and
that's okay.
on an issue that's really time sensitive, that's happening in real time. So, so thank you for that. Okay, but the following question would also connect to the Beijing Platform for Action because it is a landmark document for women's rights.
Absolutely.
But do you think the core principles are still relevant and actionable today? And do you also think that are there areas where the platform needs to be updated or reinterpreted for the current context, which can also reflect the local context?
Um, right. So the way I would look at it is, while there are many principles that are couched within the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, let's look at the third paragraph of the declaration itself, which I find very forceful. It says the member states of the United Nations are determined to advance the goals of equality, development, and peace for all women everywhere in the interest of all humanity. I think this is a fact that has not changed and is more important as we see the rolling back of progress that we just talked about as I was trying to answer your previous question. So I honestly believe the Beijing Platform for Action remains relevant today as it was 30 years ago, as it should have been 100 years ago, if it were to exist at that point. Um, and that if we could just do everything that the Platform for Action recommends, we could experience so much change in the world for women and girls, and also for everyone, as I believe that paragraph 3 really states. Um, there are spillover effects of adopting the principles of Beijing, which would be felt even in the work of artificial intelligence, to cite something that is most recent and continues to be emerging. As you know, the design and implementation of large language models um, do not depend on, uh, let me say, large language models do not, and are rather designed and implemented with this very strong male persona behind them, right? And that sort of ignores some of the specificities and circumstances that women and girls face. And so you have these advanced technological platforms not really responding um, to a world where men and women are equal. So I feel the Beijing Platform for Action does not need to be reinterpreted. I feel it needs to be applied in a world that is facing unprecedented and protracted conflicts, environmental degradation, but also technological progress. I don't know if that helps to answer this question.
No, no, that definitely helps. And the technological progress is something that we all
Mhm.
need. It's happening at such a rapid state right now. And it's something that we
It's
all need
quite
to,
alarming. Mhm.
it's quite alarming. And it's something that we all need to keep in our mind. I myself often forget that there are like what you rightly said, there are things that you need to, even when it comes to technology, you need to think about it from a gender perspective.
Mhm. Mhm.
That is that is absolutely true, and thank you so much for bringing up that point as well. Um,
Sure.
so moving on, so the 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, or CSW69, will take place in
Mhm.
March next month in New York. So,
Yeah.
what are the key priorities that UN Women will be advocating for at this session?
Right. So, um, the simple answer to this question is everything that the Beijing Platform for Action stands for. As you know, there are 12 critical areas of concern of the Platform for Action itself. And for UN Women, we want to prioritize all of these priorities. There are quite key issues that each and every one of these critical areas of concern is trying to address. And so we're looking at things ranging from ending violence against women and girls, addressing poverty, and addressing environmental challenges within the context of advancing gender equality and women's empowerment, and so on and so forth. You'll hear me talk about environment quite a bit in this podcast because that's the area of work that I actually spend a lot of my life on. So yeah, we are of course aware that there are 30-year-olds today that have lived their entire lives alongside the platform for action itself. Children that were born in 1995 who are no longer children, and they're actually young women, young men, um, who are part of this celebration that we are experiencing this year. So we will be making a push to hear what they have to say. Uh, And so a very strong youth voice is actually going to be an important priority for you in this year's CSW. We will support various interactive expert dialogues that are designed to tackle many issues. And we just talked about artificial intelligence. So these are emerging issues. We're also going to tackle old and lingering issues across the 12 critical areas of concern of Beijing. In addition to the interactive dialogue on the critical area of concern on environment, there are several events that UN Women is going to be leading and supporting on things like feminist climate justice, gender and environment data, as well as various events that we're organizing through and together with the Generation Equality Action Coalition on Feminist Action for Climate Justice, or FSCJ as we usually call it, which UN Women is a convener for. We will also be supporting governments engaging in ministerial roundtables on different related topics to the platform for action. So, as you can see, there's pretty much everything we're going to be doing and following from a substantive point of view throughout CSW to make sure that we're looking at the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action in its entirety, and not just focusing on a few isolated priorities.
Hey everyone, a quick break to share some exciting news. We are hosting a special 1-hour webinar to celebrate International Women's Day. On Friday, 7th March, not the 8th, 7th March, from 12 to 1 p.m. UTC, which is Coordinated Universal Time. So if you are interested, check out the description box for registration details and other details. All right, now back to the podcast. But the main focus of the CSW69 will be the review and appraisal of the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action as well.
Yeah.
So, what key policy recommendations do you hope will emerge from this session?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think it brings me to perhaps a conversation that we've had before we started recording this podcast. The main outcome of CSW69 is going to be a document called the Political Declaration, which is a ministerial level acclamation of renewed commitments to the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. As you know, since 1995, when the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action were adopted, we have commemorated this adoption every 5 years since. And so that is the reason we are commemorating the 30th anniversary in 2025. And we will use this moment to convene member states of the UN and work together with them as they negotiate and discuss their renewed commitments to the achievement of the Beijing Platform for Action. What we will see is whether with now that 2030 is in clear sight, which is the end line of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its Sustainable Development Goals, whether we'll see an acceleration towards the implementation of these commitments. We would love to see that acceleration happen, and not just on paper, but actually in earnest when member states leave New York after March to go back and really push for real concrete change for women and girls, and make sure that that helps to achieve the progress that we require to see in the 2030 agenda. So as you see, the Beijing Platform for Action is a platform or a process that sort of underpins success of the Sustainable Development Agenda itself. Furthermore, this is going to be a moment to uphold national and stakeholder accountability to the commitments that countries have made to the Beijing Platform for Action. We know that it's a moment of reflection and not just a moment to come and negotiate a document, but that countries will really take an introspective look at where they stand when it comes to the advancement of gender equality and women's empowerment in their own countries, but also how that contributes to this collective goal of making sure that SDG 5 can be a reality by 2030. So this is not going to be like any other CSW where you expect clear-cut policy recommendations wrapped in agreed conclusions, which are an ECOSOC resolution. In fact, the informal consultations that member states will be engaging in for the political declaration will start not in March when CSW starts, but actually next Monday on the 17th of February, which is only next week from our chat today. So yeah, that's the context in which this review and appraisal of Beijing is actually happening.
Okay. Venge, one of the key things that you have kept emphasizing is about the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and you've also mentioned that it's relevant now, it was relevant then, and it will be relevant forever, until and unless we achieve this utopia where there is a complete equality in everything.
Yeah.
Not to sound too cynical, but there is quite a lot of work cut out for us.
Absolutely. That's the kind of world we want to see someday, right?
What I've often observed, and it might be true for many people, is that there is a gap between policy and implementation on ground. So what I would want to ask you is, what could be some of the most effective strategies for bridging this gap and ensuring that the commitments made in documents like the Beijing platform is translated into tangible results that can improve the lives of women and girls on the ground?
Right. I think as I was trying to answer your first question on challenges, I think some of those could be reflections that connect to my responses for this question as well. Unfortunately, we've not quite succeeded as one world one united world to translate commitments into action. I mean, you'll find other parts of the world that have advanced so much ahead of everybody else, and others have moved forward significantly, others much less significantly. And in other cases, you do see that even those that made progress on gender equality and women's empowerment have rolled back on that progress over time. There are so many factors at play. It's a complex world, but we know that this is a challenge for gender equality that we need to work on a little bit more. So, like I said earlier, gender equality is a challenge we have identified for a very long time. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action is already 30 years old, and yet we have a long way to go to fulfill its full ambition. I think we must first of all realize that the well-being of women and girls is a right they must enjoy. In an interconnected world, we need to restore the trust in each other and celebrate the diversity that makes all of us. We then need to make sure that the multilateral system that helps us move together towards collective goals and priorities can actually work towards fulfilling the rights of women and girls just as much as it has done for men and boys. And also bear in mind the fact that as one of those core principles of Beijing, that this is for all women and girls, but also for all of humanity. That if we ignore one part of humanity, we're actually not working for the entirety of humanity. Secondly, I think we need to take a whole of society and multi-stakeholder approach to solving the problems of our time. We need government, civil society, youth, private sector, academia, and everyone that we can actually bring onto the action to play a role towards these common goals. So this is one of the reasons why UN Women established the Generation Equality Forum in 2020, which was to set up a multi-stakeholder process that was actually designed to accelerate progress on the commitments for Beijing. The third thing I want to say is we need to apply the means of implementation on social progress with a vengeance. It means money, capacity, technology, skills must all work in unison to solve for old problems while addressing challenges unseen and preparing for new challenges yet to come. And I want to underline this for everyone. COVID and the Ebola virus disease in the past few years have just taught us that we need to work together. We cannot ignore one part of society if we want to make collective progress happen. And finally, I feel that our actions must create a world where the imbalance of power between women and men is dismantled to unleash the full potential of women and girls. The care economy, as I mentioned earlier, is one good place to start. When you start seeing men and boys taking on an equal amount of the responsibility for care work within the home as a basic social unit, you will start seeing the dividends of such actions on the rights of women and girls and on their own progress in many sectors of society. Yeah.
You've just rightly said that if we want to achieve like tangible like results, we all have to work collectively. We all have to work
Mm-hmm.
together.
Mm-hmm.
So in this line, What can civil society and particularly grassroots women's organization or organizations that work for gender equality can do to influence the outcome and ensure that their voices are heard in global decision-making spaces?
I sort of expected that question to come, particularly following the previous one. Yeah, it's very clear the civil society plays a very crucial role in development and human prosperity for its unique ability to represent the voices of the people, but also in tackling the challenges that human beings face. It's in large part the voice of civil society that led to the adoption of the UN General Assembly Resolution 64 stroke 289, the resolution that established UN Women as a composite entity to promote gender equality and women's empowerment in 2010, now 15 years ago. So CSOs must continue to advocate for their constituents' issues and priorities in national development processes, but also make sure to share these experiences at the international level. And such platforms as the Commission on the Status of Women being a global policy-making process for gender equality and women's empowerment is an important space where civil society can actually bring those practical solutions to the fore at the international level for cross-learning and making sure that this learning can find its way into the policy decisions that governments are going to be making. I think CSOs must also continue to engage governments at all levels to ensure that policymaking is responsive to the realities on the ground, building on gathered evidence, of course, and narratives that define sustainable solutions. The work that we've been doing on gender and environment data with several partners, including civil society partners, is such that we make recommendations for the collection of non-traditional, or rather the collection of data through non-traditional or non-official sources, right? Because we know this is one area that civil society actually thrives. And it is high time that we started paying attention to that knowledge, that research, those data that are collected by civil society through their work on the ground that can actually inform how we need to craft real solutions that are actually going to bring about change. So the engagement of governments at all these levels, the subnational, national, but also international levels, is absolutely important for civil society to actually engage in. And I hope that civil society is going to come to the celebration of 30 years of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action with a renewed appetite for acceleration of progress on the Platform for Action itself, through the work they're going to do as they want to fulfill those commitments, but also the work that they do to push their governments towards being more accountable to those commitments that they made in 1995. Thank you.
That sounds absolutely wonderful. And it's the start of 2025. So let's hope
Mm-hmm.
it'll be the start of many good things and many wins
Yeah.
for gender equality as well.
Yes, let's hope so. And really look forward to really making good progress on this agenda this year.
Absolutely. Venge, I know that was supposed to be the last of the question, but there is another question that I like to ask. I'm sorry for
Okay.
throwing it out there. But
No, do go ahead.
this is nothing to do with work, but more on a personal
Mm-hmm.
front. I just wanted
Right.
to know, because you've spoken so passionately about gender equality, and this is something
Mm-hmm.
that you absolutely believe in. I wanted to ask, when was that moment in your personal journey where when you realized that this is the
the area that I want to work in. This is what I want to do.
Wow. It's very hard to point to one specific time. I think for me, it's it's a process that has been culminating into the things I do today. I think it's in my entire life that I've actually seen gender equality at work. I'm gonna tell you a story about that my own father told me about his grandfather. I come from Malawi, so you probably would be aware that um, a country in Africa in the 1800s would not be a very close relative to gender equality as one would hope. But my great grandfather, who at some point raised my own father, used to cook for the house. He was the cook of the house, and he was a pretty good cook, actually, to the extent that my father recalls jumping at his grandfather's porridge when he cooked it, and would actually frown if it was the grandmother who prepared food for him. I think that to me has struck a chord because um, it tells us that the abilities to take on certain roles within the household are not ascribed by nature. They are roles that are socially constructed and then defined for a one sex, and we have inculcated that to become a norm that we have used and seen to this very day. So those kind of stories have challenged me to realize that women, just as men, do hold so much potential for so many things, and that it's not embarrassing for a man to do a piece of work that is usually considered a woman's. And yeah, I joined the development space when I was only 2 years into my um, um, undergraduate years. And so I have seen a lot of things that have basically brought about the passion for gender equality for me. And I'm one of the lucky few that have ended up working for this wonderful organization called UN Women to advance on that cause, and has brought me to get in touch with wonderful people like you and the Women for Biodiversity, and all the friends that we have made over the years, to really look at the diversity of opportunities we have to not just advance the well-being of women and girls and their rights, but to also make sure that we advance gender equality as a new norm that is going to make this world a better place.
Thank you for staying with us until the end of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. If you'd like to connect with us, follow Women for Biodiversity on social media. The handles are in the description box. And don't hesitate to share this episode. You can reach out to us at communications@womenforbiodiversity.org. Remember, that's the number 4 instead of FOR. So until the next episode, stay strong and carry on.